Welcome. I am Tom Evans, and with me also is Kenny Kranseler. If you could jump ahead a couple of slides there, Kenny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
there we
there.
go. So I am a consultant and trainer at Productside, and I'm calling in from Austin, Texas today, which is where I live. And Kenny, I'll let you do a quick intro for you.
Sure, yeah, I'm calling in from Seattle, Washington. Similarly, a consultant and trainer here at Productside. And Tom and I are co-authors of the um, um, Chaos to Clarity ebook that Productside is happy to be launching this month, which you'll have a chance to take a look at the end of class, but we'll be running through it as we go through.
All right. Thank you, Kenny. And just real quick, I am going to be the moderator, and Kenny is our primary presenter. So I'm just here to make sure Kenny behaves well. First of
That's a
all,
tough
you
job,
probably,
Tom.
so you may want to know a little bit about us and oops, just a second here. I jumped slides. All right. So
There you go.
let's go and introduce ourselves here at Product Side. We know how hard it is to deliver products people not only use, but truly love. Whether it's aligning stakeholders, predicting customer needs, or managing endless backlogs, we've seen it all. And that's why we're here, because we want to be your outcome driven product partner. And so our goal is not just to provide you training only, but we want to provide you complete solutions that help you lead to gaining transformation. So you take the best practices and are able to implement them and actually see change happening, not only in terms of your performance of product management, but how it impacts your organization. We do tailor our work. We have years of experience working across different industries, and so we make sure that we present and lead within your context. And of course, along with that, we're all very invested in this work. We do this because we love product management, and we have been doing it for a long time. So that's just a little bit about us. We're thrilled that you're here with us today. Let us continue on. So, one is we love to get questions, and those questions can come during as we're speaking. You can put those into the Q&A window, but we also encourage you to chat with each other in the chat window. So, if you would put the questions into the Q&A window, I will be monitoring that and bringing those up as appropriate for Kenny to address. And then also, if you have thoughts or anything that you want to share in the chat window, please feel free to do that. Now, one of the questions we often get is, can I watch the recording later? And the answer is absolutely yes. We will send you a link to the recording after the webinar ends. Well, we want to make sure that, the energy that comes out of this webinar doesn't just stop here, but we want to make sure that that energy continues. Go ahead, one more slide there,
There
Kenny.
we go. Okay.
There we go. And so we want to encourage you to join us on LinkedIn. So join our Product Side LinkedIn group where there's a number of people that are active sharing thoughts and be able to gain some insights into best practices, find out new ideas or ask questions around the role of product management, find tips that are going to help you become better. So we'd love for you to join that conversation. And with that, why don't we
Jump in.
jump into your presentation?
All
All right.
right. Thank.
So here's
All
the
right. Thank you.
agenda.
All right. Thank you, Tom. So first thing to note is that if you've been to past product side webinars, this one's going to be a little different from some of those webinars. So rather than diving in deep on a specific product management topic, we're really using this webinar to kick off the launch of our new ebook titled The Productside Blueprint at Work. So the ebook, it takes you on a journey through that product side blueprint and some of the key elements of our playbook. And we're doing it through a lens of a company called Wellnest Health. And Wellness Health, it's a fictitious company. But while it's not a true company, I'm sure that many of you will recognize and empathize with some of the challenges they face. And you might even be able to relate some of their struggles and learn from how the product side playbook helps them better position their products. So we'll start the webinar with an overview of Wellnest. and some of their concerns. And then we'll dive into how some of the key members of their product team are starting to use the Productside Blueprint to align stakeholders with a clear understanding of their customers and some of the outcomes that will move wellness forward. And finally, we'll provide you all with some early access to our ebook, where we go into detail on specifically the tools and techniques that wellness might be using to enhance their product journey. So let's start with an introduction to wellness health so you can relate to what they're trying to accomplish and some of the obstacles that are in their way as they start to think about adopting the Productside Blueprint. Now, as I said, Wellness Health, it's a completely made up company. Trust me, you won't be able to visit their website. But if you're a product manager or you lead product teams, I am sure that you will recognize some of the challenges they face. So why does the story of Wellness Health matter? Well, many of our product management teams that we've worked with, or your product management teams, are probably blessed, and I'll use that term in quotes, with the chaos from the lack of focus, ill-defined strategies, hundreds of requests, and an ever-growing feature backlog to deliver output that, well, likely will not create customer or enterprise value. But there is potential for the Productside Blueprint to get us to concentrate instead on outcomes and a process that enables us to iterate quickly and cheaply and deliver on those outcomes and delight customers and hopefully executives as well. First, a little background
Oh,
on
Kenny,
wellness.
Kenny, I was just going
Yeah,
to say along that line
yeah, go
is,
ahead.
I've seen some research that shows that if you look at all of the features that get delivered as part of, a product development, that I can't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere under 50% actually deliver, real value. And so you think about, managing in this situation and how little of impact so much of your work actually has on delivering value for the customers or for your organization.
For sure. Yeah. So the before picture is, you're creating a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't do a heck of a lot of good for customers or the business itself, right? So let me provide a little background on Wellness. And as I said, not a real company, but they're probably not all that dissimilar from many of the companies that you all work
Mhm.
for, right? Wellness has created an enterprise health management service that provides access to its wellness platform for employers and healthcare providers, basically to enhance the health of their employees and patients. So for our story, we're going to focus on Heather Leaf, who's the VP of Product at Wellness Health, and Tommy Trunk, who is Heather's top product manager. So imagine this scenario, right? Heather calls over Tommy Trunk for their weekly meetings. She's just come out of a leadership briefing. It's not good news, right? Once again, the company has posted a weak quarter, lackluster results from its flagship product, BuildNest. Now, BuildNest is a comprehensive wellness platform, offers physical and financial well-being tools to employees, while giving employers and healthcare providers a HIPAA-compliant 360-degree view of health trends across large populations. Now, wellness has a strong foundation. They're backed by a trusted 20-year-old brand and a long-standing relationship with employers, employees, and healthcare practitioners. But its product management journey has been far from smooth, right? As well as the wellness market's grown, and it's grown ever more competitive, the wellness product management team has been under some increasing pressure. They're delivering features requested by sales, by executives, by enterprise clients. Often they don't have time to step back and start to assess the strategic impact of what they're creating. Team is shipping constantly, but they seem to be struggling to prove they're moving the needle on the things that matter most. Despite some success with this reactive, feature-driven approach, wellness is starting to fall behind. New players are in the market with agile teams, and they're building breakthrough wearable integrations, all landing insurer-driven distribution deals for their offerings, right? Internally, executive leadership's frustrated, and they're starting to point fingers at the product management team. They've asked to come back with a strategy that delivers more value to customers and drives measurable growth. All right, we've hit our first poll. All right, launch the poll. I want to know of the folks that are out there, how many feel Heather and Tommy's pain at your company? So you can choose yes most of the time, sometimes, but not all that frequently, or now we're a humming outcome-focused product management team. See how they're coming in.
Let's wait just another 10 seconds here, give everybody a chance to respond to that. We have most everybody, but we'll give everyone just a couple more seconds. All right. Well, why don't we end the poll there and see what everyone came up with? And we should be sharing the results, so everybody should be able to see
For
those. So,
sure.
Kenny, it
Yeah, it
says
sounds like most people
most,
can feel the pain of Heather and Tommy.
yeah, and there's nobody who said we are a humming outcome focused product management team. So,
Yeah.
all I can say is welcome to the world of many other organizations, because I think it's quite common to run into that.
Yeah, you're not alone, and fortunately, you can feel the pain that the wellness product management team's feeling as well, right? All right, so let's figure out how to solve this, right? So, fortunately, Heather's had some discussions with the product side team, and to guide her transformation at Wellness Health, she introduces the product blueprint. It's a structured, outcome-driven approach to product management. Again, it's not just about doing more discovery, it's about making every product decision intentional, aligned, and grounded strategy. Now, a little background, the blueprint's built around 5 phases. Context, which is the outside circle, and then within that context, investigate, define, create, and deliver. Each phase is designed to help teams move beyond being reactive and beyond that reactive execution and toward a customer-centered, business-aligned product leadership, right? So here's how each phase will guide Heather and Tommy at Wellnest, right? So context. First, Heather and Tommy need to establish that shared understanding of things like business strategy, market landscape, competitive environment, right? It means aligning with leadership on what are wellness top priorities and using that alignment to define a clear product vision. Without the foundation, it's impossible to make product decisions that truly support the company's long-term goals. Then with that strategic context in place, it's time to dig into discovery. In this investigate phase, Heather and Tommy work to uncover real customer needs through empathy interviews, persona development, jobs to be done analysis. Rather than just jump into solutions, they focus on deeply understanding the problems that their customers have and those that are worth solving, grounding their product decisions in real-world insights, not just a whole bunch of assumptions. Then they move on to define, right? Once they've identified some of the meaningful customer needs, Heather and Tommy, they start to lead the team through some low-fidelity experimentation, explore a range of potential solutions, test hypotheses, gather feedback, all before committing to full-scale development. This phase helps the team reduce risk, build confidence in a direction before investing significant time and resources on something that may not matter. Figured out what the right solution is, they're ready to create. They shift from insight to action. In this create phase, Heather and Tommy turn their validated ideas into a focused strategy and build a prioritized roadmap. They define product goals, metrics, use prioritization frameworks to stay focused on what matters most. Result? Well, they get a roadmap that's not just a list of features, but a strategic plan for delivering customer and business outcomes. Finally, it's time to bring the product to market in the deliver phase and keep learning post-launch. In this phase, Heather and Tommy align cross-functional teams on key messages, success metrics, and rollout plans. Their work doesn't stop after launch, though. Tiny acts of discovery. They continue to gather insights, iterate, adapt that product over time, make sure their solutions evolve to meet real needs, and signal when it's time to scale, refine, or retire the product. So that's the journey that Heather and Tommy will bring them through, and I'll bring you through in the course of the next 20 minutes or so, right? So start with context, right? So to understand the context that they're building this product lived in, they sought to get a better grasp of the strategic, market, and customer context of their offerings. Historically, product decisions at Wellness were driven by urgency. Who shouted the loudest? Not what mattered most. As a result, well, the team, they chased features that didn't move the needle, sometimes created products out of sync with the direction of their market was headed, and disconnected with the key priorities of the company. There was a clear divide, and their customers were moving more towards other offerings in the marketplace as they saw competition addressing the key needs their customers had, and there were consistent gaps in the wellness offerings, right? So to better understand strategic content, Heather started having a heart-to-heart discussion with several key executives at Wellness Health. she had a discussion about what business outcomes they were looking for. Not just grow revenue and profit, but what key outcomes would lead to higher revenue and profits. And what were the key metrics that would be tracked to evidence those outcomes? Heather and Tommy then took a look back at the key markets their products operated in and some of the forces that impact the healthcare systems, healthcare providers, employers, employees, patients that would start to interact with some of these wellness solutions. They did a pestle analysis to build a model of what that market looked like going forward. They thought deeply about the geographies their products were sold into and looked at the key, and the reason I call it pestle is political, economic, social, technical, environmental, and legal forces in some of those geographies. And they looked at the impact on their medical and HR customers and what that would mean for the employee and patient populations their customers served. Lastly, Heather and Tommy took a stock of what they already knew about customers, from sales conversations, support tickets, and customer events. Started to aggregate those. They used some AI to actually help them work through all those. They used these inputs to draft an initial hypothesis on some of what the product outcomes could best support some of wellness business goals. All of these insights about the context of their offerings would enable Tommy and Heather to begin their discovery and enhance and evolve some of their product offerings, right? So with that, yeah.
Can you just real quick there on that context phase?
Yeah.
One of the things you talked about is that conversation that Heather had with the executive team to get clarity around the goals and the true outcomes of the organization. And I know that as I've worked with product managers in many of my classes, when we get talking about, do you know the strategy or the organization? Do you know the key outcomes? They often feel like, yeah, here's some high level direction, but it's not, very detailed. And so that's something where I think that's a huge step forward if you can go and get some bit better clarity around the context.
Yeah.
And definitely for
Get
Heather,
deep.
that made a
Get deep
difference.
on what those things that they are, right? Don't just stop at, hey, we need revenue to grow by 20% and profits to grow by 15%.
Exactly.
No, it's
Yeah.
more than that. What's going on? What are the challenges? What's blocking them getting there? What are some of the key pieces that are enabled, and as a result, what things they need to support from a customer, from a business and customer perspective. All right, so they got the context set. They got that strategic foundation in place. They understand their market. They understand the business needs. They have a little understanding of the segments they're reaching, right? They're ready to step into that next phase, right? Investigate. Here's where theory meets reality, right? And the assumptions they made about customers, they're starting to put to test. It's all about uncovering and validating real customer needs, using a mix of qualitative understanding and talking to their customers, as well as some of the quantitative actions that their customers are doing. Heather noticed that the team had often talked about customers, but really didn't have a real notion of who they were serving and what they needed. Their VP of sales, Joe Branch, he spouted on about customers, but it was mostly about the barriers of the products with no understanding of the impacts of their product on users. And the CEO of Wellness, Lucas Health, he would say that he needed a save of seat at their key company meetings so the customer could chime in on the discussion. But he often used that empty seat to call for whatever technology du jour that he thought the product team should get into. Last month it was blockchain, and this month it was just to put AI anywhere and everywhere in their marketing speak. Sound familiar? Well, Heather and Tommy know that if they want to move the needle on retention and market share, they'll need to dig deeper, right? Process, it's not clean, it's not linear, it's iterative, it's messy, and it's often surprising. But with the right tools from the product playbook, they're confident they can guide the team to sharper insights and smarter decisions. They started out by defining proto-personas of their segments and the customers, and they followed that up with some quantitative research to validate some of their initial assumptions. They chose to focus on 3 key personas. The HR manager or buyer, representing the employer segment of their market, the employee, or who's the user, it was the individual engaging with their wellness programs, and the healthcare provider, who is both a buyer and in some instances a user from wellness provider facing segment. They created these personas starting with key backgrounds, interests, needs. They also detailed the persona's role in the buying and using of wellness products, their goals in connecting to those products, as well as some of the frustrations. They even captured some key quotes from representatives of these persona groups. Most importantly, they share these personas with the entire wellness team so that they could use their persona both as a reference point to talk more specifically about the customer's key products. No more technology of the day being disguised as customer insight from CEO Lucas, right? And as part of their discovery, they talk to these personas and they learn deeply about how, where, when, why they used or didn't use some wellness offerings. Tommy admitted he was a bit nervous walking into his first empathy interview, but Heather, she reassured him with a grin saying, don't dominate the customer conversation, just listen a lot. You'd be surprised how much people will share when they're hurt. And by the end of the last interview session, Tommy's voice is hoarse, from talking, but his energy's high. I didn't realize how much we've been missing, he says. Flipping through his notes, he said, this is gold, right? So a lot was going on. And why was it gold? Well, the team got a great understanding of what their customers were looking for. They built from insights to themes to conclusions. They used a tool called Jobs to be Done to summarize some of their key learnings, right? This Jobs to be Done framework, it helps product teams by building a clear understanding of what a customer is trying to accomplish by, by using the product. Essentially, what job they might hire the product to do. And again, the jobs can be functional. That is, what the product helps them do, but it also could be emotional, how it makes them feel, or social, how it makes them seem to others. They then start to look at the pains the customers has in accomplishing their jobs, as well as some of the potential gains they can achieve from completing these jobs. By focusing on outcomes instead of outputs, that Job to be Done tool helps the team think beyond features and focus on true value, right? So Heather, she walked the team through the exercise. He guided them to move beyond assumptions and ground their thinking of what they heard during the interviews to start to understand the types of capabilities that, if added to their product offering, would ease the pains and enhance the gains that customers sought in using these wellness products.
Yeah, Kenny, this is so powerful starting, with this context, because one is they have a very complex environment where you, in a way, you have three key customers that you're serving between, with the employer, the patient, and then also the provider within the healthcare community. And all of them have to buy into the use of the product to be able to create that value. And being able to go and actually, I know that in their minds, they all kind of knew this stuff, but being able to document it and get that aligned, get everybody aligned on that so that they really understand who these three key personas were and what those needs were, super powerful.
Yeah, they started to understand the interaction between these personas and what it meant for an employee to use their wellness offerings that had a value for the employer and what they could do as a result thereof. Similarly, how the healthcare provider could provide better care as a result of some of the tools they use. Ended it all up, they started to get that deeper understanding of these goals and struggles, right? They developed a set of key business outcomes, what success looked like for wellness health, and what product outcomes, what their customers viewed as success, and they were able to connect it to, right? Connect what customers needed to what wellness aimed to achieve as a business, right? They started to refine and structure and reflect on the learnings that they built in the interviews from the Jobs to be Done work. They ensured a tight alignment between the product outcomes of what success looked like for customers and business outcomes of how that drove success for wellness itself, right? Had a good understanding of what needed to be created. That allowed them to move into that define phase, right? They were able to transform some of their insight now into ideas into testable solution hypothesis, start to explore some creative concepts, prototype, align stakeholders, right? Before they use the blueprint, before they started using this process, solution discussions tended to happen before the team really understood their customers' problems and needs. On more than one occasion, Heather remembered that Joe Branch, that sales VP, he was defining product features for the team to implement in the middle of a sales call with customer. Right? Anybody run into that? I know I have. You, Tom?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So now they were armed with some proper customer discovery. They built in that investigation phase. Heather, instead of just following that one-off feature a large customer had requested, she pulls together her cross-functional team. She pulled in Charlie Lim, her product development lead. She pulled in engineers, user experience designers, research leads. They looked at the customer personas. They looked at the key insights they'd picked up in that investigation phase. They started to explore what might be for their customer, right? Heather was saying to the team, no idea is too out there. Let's start wide, dream big, we'll narrow later, right? They begin one customer group at a time. They start with the HR managers, again, who serve both the buyer and the user, right? She introduced a concept called how might we, right? And enabled her to start doing the brainstorming and focus on customer needs without boxing it in, right? She started with the HR manager, Sarah strategist, or that one. It's all about getting her employees to use the wellness solutions that Wellness Health was providing, and being able to track and report on that usage, and as a result, define the right benefits program that might work for her, right? The how might we questions for Sarah, they're all about helping her drive that better engagement with the wellness service. Having her employees engage better, tracking the usage of those programs, using that data to better customize the programs to meet the needs of Sarah's employees, right? And Heather and Tommy, well, they started to use this process to work with their teams to start to find solutions that are targeted at the needs and expectations of all the customers. So she did this work not just for the HR managers, but also did it with employees, with the healthcare providers, to start to understand where their opportunities were to drive solutions that actually and help some of their customers out there, right? They had a few promising ideas in hand, right? They started to shift gears at this point, right? It was time to start to test the potential of each solution before they started investing in design, before they started development, before they started that delivery process, right? Their goal was to move the one step closer to that notion of product market fit, right? Fortunately, they went through the product side training, so they know that getting there requires navigating the intersection of these three key factors, right? Valuable, right? Does this solve a real problem customers care about? Would they use it? Would they pay for it? Would they at least see enough value to stay engaged, right? Feasible, right? Can wellness actually build and support this solution using, without going nuts on resources? Or if they needed to, maybe they could reasonably acquire what was needed in time to deliver it, right? And lastly, viable, right? Does that solution support the business goals and deliver the return on investment in a way that makes long-term success, right? So Heather, eventually going to test all three of these. She starts by testing value, because solution doesn't resonate with users, the feasibility and viability don't matter. So rather than jumping straight into a prototype, rather than jumping straight into a mock-up and building up and having her development team build a whole bunch of things, they started with this notion of prototyping, right? We don't want to waste time building something no one wants. They wanted to learn fast and cheap, right? A lot of different potential prototyping techniques that are detailed in the ebook if you go acquire it, but they chose to use storyboards, right? They wanted to paint a clear picture of what that user journey looked like and potentially see if they could spark some emotional reaction, right? It was fast, it was lightweight. They even used AI to create the images and pictures, right? It was well suited for testing some early ideas with the employers and with the employees and some of the HR leaders, right? This is a story for the employee view of what they were thinking of creating for Elliott Energized, right? That employee patient persona. They show this journey to get feedback from some of the employee users of wellness solutions. That enabled them to refine and enhance some of their efforts to get more daily usage of their offerings, right? They did multiple iterations of exercises like this. The solutions started to come together. Heather and Tommy, they continued to collaborate with the development team, with the customer success teams, with the design teams, working with tools like this to get customer feedback and continue to enhance and iterate on their proposed solution. Eventually, they started to focus on what it was. They now needed to start to ask for the resources to go execute on some of the platform enhancements and some of the reconfiguration they were looking for, right? They knew that translating customer insights into definitive actionable strategy would require more than just ideas. It would take alignment, right? They needed to get the whole team, they needed to get executives on board. So they created this product outcome canvas, right? Tie everything together: customer needs, solution concepts, measurable outcomes, strategic business goals. It wouldn't be built in a vacuum, right? To start to shape the canvas, they leveraged their cross-functional team. They had a working session around the table. They had Charlie from product development. They had Susie Bowe, who was from marketing. They pulled in Joe Branch from sales. Had a handful of other stakeholders who all contributed to stress test the plan from multiple angles, right? They summarized some of their findings from the phase that led to the discovery of this enhanced solution. And they even built, even at this early point, some of the initial positioning of that offering that they pulled together for the key target customers. They started to think about some of the key features that would be needed to implement and deliver on that hoped for customer value. They also didn't stop there. They captured some of the key risks. It wasn't going to be a risk-free enabling. and some of the enhancements, as well as they started at this point to define success metrics that would be used to gauge the realization of their objectives, right? Even at this point, they knew what success would look like for their solution, right? Lastly, they didn't forget to put what they ask, what resources they would need to implement these changes, be it in development, be it in design, be it in go-to-market. Could buy it in, could sell it, could have senior executives. Lucas Nest was impressed by it, and they decided to go forward with these enhancements to the platform that they developed.
Kenny, this is one area that I think is so valuable also, is that one of our challenges that we often see is, how do I get stakeholders aligned on what we really want to be able to accomplish? And just being able to share these basic facts goes a long ways in getting everybody aligned around what your vision and goals are. Plus, it's a great way to get some additional feedback and insights. But I love this product outcome canvas and
Yeah, it's a team
helping get
sport,
that
right?
alignment.
They need help from across the company to actually create this. And
Yeah.
also, it forced them to do some of that thinking early on, right? What were the
Mhm.
risks of actually implementing this solution? What were the success metrics that would define if this was going to be a successful initiative or not, right? What were they going to track once they created and delivered the solution, right? And what they actually needed to go create it, at least early on, right? So
Mhm.
everybody was aligned on what that took and what they needed to build as a result of it, right? So they got agreement from senior management. They knew they were on the right course. They transitioned into creating this enhanced build nest suite. But they had a couple of key questions, right? What was the roadmap and what that would create the needed customer functionality across all their personas? And what was the actual implementation plan to make sure that enhanced platform would be successful in that complex healthcare plan, insurers, corporations, and care providers? In past efforts of product development enhancement at Wellness, they just took a host of features that sales had heard from customers and threw them into their Jira projects. There's no coherence in the feature list, no impact assumed in the company. They measured success of the product team basically on how many features they pumped out each year. Sound familiar? Right? It happens a lot, right? But so Heather and Tommy, they're leading a shift. They're leading the shift in how products are developed at Wellness. They got a clear mandate: build something that's strategically sound, customer informed, and operationally feasible. Doesn't mean just stacking features into a roadmap. It really means aligning all their decisions with the business outcomes they defined earlier, right? They need to validate some of the risky assumptions before investing heavily. They need to sequence delivery in a way that delivers value early and often, right? So again, they're bringing their stakeholders together, development and design teams, with all the information they picked up in their discovery sequence, to really start to sequence some of their strategic initiatives for realizing success from this enhanced Build Nest platform. They work together, they prioritize product outcomes that really enhance customers' lives and will hopefully ultimately lead to better acceptance of the initiatives. It's not a calendar of delivery deadlines, but a visual narrative that connects product outcomes to business impact, right? And by focusing the roadmap around some of the outcomes, right? The product management team has reframed the conversation. It's no longer about what shipping when, it's about what problems they're solving, why those problems matter, and how they can track impact along the way, right? So Heather brings the draft roadmap to a couple of Wellness early adopters. These are longstanding customers who aren't afraid to speak candidly. And it gets some good feedback, right? When they talk to one HR manager who points that, well, the dynamic templates are exciting. The real power lies in accompanying best practices, explicit guidance on when and how to use them. Without that, she says adoption might stall, right? And on the provider side, she talks to a medical director who stresses the need for staff training to ensure that dashboards and predictive outputs are not just available, but that they're usable, right? This iteration is hugely valuable, and the team tests some of their incoming hypotheses with tiny acts of discovery, small targeted experiments that test key assumptions before they make big investments. Unlike traditional research or usability testing, They're designed to be fast, be focused, be evidence generating, right? This enabled them to actually develop a research plan that delivers on what they're doing, right? To where they're going, how they're getting there, and where they can be as a result thereof, right? So they've created sort of that a set of outputs that they want to have going there, right? Right? They're, they get input from Joe Branch, who said our sales team needs to effectively articulate how each release drives value for our customers. From Susie over in marketing, she's agreeing with Joe and suggests building a targeted case studies for HR managers. Charlie at development, he raised a little red flag. He says the integrated dashboards are complex and we'll need more engineering support to get it right. Heather suggests a phased release, starting with smaller practices and scaling up once feedback loops are established. They all nod in agreement, knowing that sequencing will be key to managing scope and resources. They've started to finalize that outcome-based roadmap and release plan. It'll guide development and launch. Every output is now grounded in validated insight. Each phase of work is mapped to specific outcomes. And while the development of that first iteration of the Build Nest platform progresses, Heather and Tommy, they're making sure that Susie and her marketing team have what they need to convince customers to adopt this enhanced platform, right? In the old days, prior to their Productside Blueprint launches at Wellness, well, they consisted of the product team giving marketing a date when the product will be complete and sending a list of features that were added to the release. Marketing, well, they just tended to promote the features they understood from the release notes that were handed to them, regardless of whether or not they addressed some of the key.
And they often got that feature list like a week or so before they were ready to launch. So it made it even more challenging, right?
Yeah. Now though, Tommy and Heather, they're embracing a new way of partnering with Susie and her marketing team. While they're in the process of developing and testing the current release, early on, they've already started to create a positioning platform for each persona based on some of that insight they had earlier on. They're essentially framing what they need to be offering in the mind of each persona for it to be embraced. With the next phase of the platform nearing completion, they're now building on that position. They're starting to develop a messaging platform for each persona, starting with a set of key messages that need to be delivered for each persona. And, essentially 3 to 4 focus messages that provide the so what of the platform persona. They're focused on benefits. They're not focused on features, right? And then they pair some of those messages with a set of proof points. It validates the value or reason to believe for some of those messages. They're leveraging some of the early beta feedback they're getting from users, some of the usage data they're getting around that. They can now point to features in development as proof points to convince customers of that promised benefits. All right, fast forward a bit. They've developed the first increment. It's progressing well, and the platform's getting ready to launch. Should Heather and Tommy feel secure and rest, assured that they're all set to release the offering for customers? Well, not so fast, right? Heather pauses. She reflects on a well-earned lesson, hard-earned lesson from 2 years earlier. It's a cautionary tale that still stings in Heather's mind. Back then, Wellness had launched its Wellness Insights dashboard. It was a data product aimed at HR managers. On paper, the solution looked solid, promised actionable insights and ROI metrics to help HR teams measure employee wellness program performance. But the launch fell flat and fast. Heather tells us we had tunnel vision. We focused so much on building the product that we skipped over everything else: marketing clarity, team alignment, customer support. So what went wrong? Well, there were a couple problems, right? There were product gaps. Dashboard, it was visually impressive, didn't have key features, didn't have exportable reports, flexible metrics. Customer needed to share the insight with their own leadership. Beta tester flagged these issues, but the team just kept pushing forward, assuming they could patch the gaps post-launch. There was a market disconnect. Some of their marketing materials, they oversold the tool's capability. And so when HR managers explored the dashboard, they found it didn't deliver on the promised depths of insights. It's not what we expected was a common refrain in customer feedback. And there was organizational misalignment, right? The sales and support team, they weren't adequately trained. Sales struggled to answer detailed customer questions. Support teams were overwhelmed with tickets they weren't prepared to resolve, right? The result, well, several key accounts downgraded their contracts or didn't renew, citing frustration with the dashboard. The NPS or Net Promoter Score, it plummeted, damaging wellness reputation. Internally, the failure led to finger pointing between departments as each tried to identify who's at fault, right? Experience taught Heather and the team the hard way, right? Product readiness on its own doesn't cut it. If the market isn't aligned, if the organization isn't prepared, the launch fails. Full stop, right? They didn't want to repeat that. So what they do, well, they are going to approach this launch differently, using a full lens of readiness, making sure, one, there's product readiness. Product must work. Enhanced features, dynamic templates, gamified challenges, smartwatch setup guides, integrated HR dashboards, expanded HR integrations need to be functional, tested, and ready to meet the customer needs from the first day, right? The market's ready. The customers knew exactly what they were getting and why it mattered, right? Team commits to a clear benefits-led messaging that I talked about before, matches the product's capabilities. They're going to use things like webinars, beta testimonials, preview content to start to create early momentum and clarity. And they need to make sure the organization was ready, right? Sales and support had to be equipped to win, right? They had training sessions, FAQs, call scripts, mock call scripts, troubleshooting guides, everything they needed to make sure there wasn't a lot of internal friction around this, right? All right, they're ready to launch.
Kenny, got a
Yeah,
question. So Anna
yeah,
put a question up here, and it really kind of goes back to the create phase, but it says, what happens when Joe Branch gets the next big client opportunity that requires a completely different product outcome? And so we have a well-organized set of outcomes, but
yeah.
Joe, leading the sales team says, I need this to close this deal.
Well, fortunately, she's got some with the work they've done to date, they have some rationale of why they're doing these things first. So you don't tell Joe no, you just say not yet. Maybe next
Mhm.
we'll build that in the hopper for our next iteration of whether that makes sense, right?
Yep. Yep.
Go
Yep.
convince the customer of the key functionality we're just building here and make sure there's value in that.
Right. And I think the other part is this is a great opportunity to remind Joe who our initial target market is because, yes, salespeople are going to do this, but he is probably out trying to sell to somebody that wasn't a part of that initial target market also.
Yeah, thanks for that. Exactly. All right, so they're ready to launch. Um, Heather and Tommy, they've gathered team. They're not just celebrating, but they're aligning around a shared message: deliver outcomes, not just feature. Right. In prior launches, the wellness practice could best be described as set it and forget it. Once the product was released, the team they patted themselves on the back. They got ready for the
Mhm.
next set of features to work on from their backlog. There wasn't a coherent plan to get the product accepted or even evolved based on feedback. For this launch, Tommy and Heather wanted to do things differently.
I've had so
Right.
many customers I've worked with when I ask them what success is, they say we delivered the features on time.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right?
well, we launched the product on time. Well, that's not success, is it?
Yeah, so this launch, they did a series of webinars specific to the three personas they had, one for HR managers, one for employees, one for healthcare providers, right? During the HR session, they had a beta user share their experience with how they used the dynamic templates and how much time it saved, right? To start to reinforce the team was on the right track, right? Tommy, he set up real-time feedback loops, coordinating closely with Joe to capture input from the sales team while Susie's marketing team monitored email engagement and messaging in flight. Engagement was strong. It was growing, right? As that post-launch momentum builds, Heather, she calls the team together again to ground everyone in how they'll measure what matters most, right? If we want to stay customer-centric, we have to track two kinds of signals, right? Success metrics, which they set up, and health metrics, right? The success metrics she explained, they're the ultimate litmus test, right? Are we achieving our goals, delivering value, driving outcomes? She walks the team through some of the core success metrics, right? To make these metrics visible and actionable, Tommy and Hera, they work with the data team to sort of build a live dashboard that tracks the progress toward each target. Part of the story. They also set up a set of health metrics, right? These are the warning signals, right? They help catch problems before they hurt adoption, before they hurt satisfaction, or before they ruin the stability of the product, right? They agree to monitor some of these health metrics weekly, those measures that the team tracks in their weekly business reviews. Deviations from goal, they're tracked for root cause. They start to make alterations if the product's not hitting it, the marketing's not hitting it, service or operations need to be enhanced around that, right? It's all a process of continuous improvement, right? Let's cycle forward to a couple of months post-launch, right? Tommy's looking at the success metrics. Progress is promising. They're hitting on nearly all the metrics, right? Tommy's encouraged, but he knows that they're not quite hitting the mark across the board. right? So instead of just guessing, he goes back to the source. He goes back to customers. He starts to organize a new round of feedback sessions with key personas to start to unpack what's working, what's not working. You hear a couple of things, right? HR managers want flexibility in analytics and reporting. Employees, they're eager for a broader variety of some of the gamified challenges. Even the healthcare providers, they call out for a need for simplified onboarding, right? Teams reacting to this, start trying to iterate, right? They translate that feedback into some tangible improvements to put in the next release cycle, expanding the analytics library, adding new gamification themes, developing video tutorials for the onboarding of healthcare providers, right? Susie says, well, every enhancement's a chance to build trust and deepen relationships. The more we listen and respond, the stronger our products and our customer loyalty becomes. All right, one more poll. Of the phases we discussed, which one do you think would have the most impact on your customers? Context, investigate, define, create, deliver, or you think you have it all set across the board?
Yeah, I'm really interested in this one to see. I know where I find most of my clients have weaknesses
Yeah,
and probably can improve a lot, but I'm really curious to see what this group is going to tell us.
let's see what they tell us.
Let's see here. We're getting about half of the respondents. Let's wait here another 10 seconds. So we'll count it down here: 10, 9, 8, 7,
Quickly get your answers in before we run out of
6,
time.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Well, let's
All
go ahead and
right.
close the
It's a
poll
little
and
bit across the board if
votes.
we see, right?
Yep.
Little more for investigate, but really sort of everywhere. Each of the key
Yeah.
ones.
It's good to see one is that it is across the board, but
Right.
I would, based on what I've seen over the years, is the investigate is where so many
Yeah.
companies fall short. Is
Yeah,
that
it's driving that innovation, really understanding your customer, really understanding their
yeah,
needs and what success looks like for them.
yeah.
Right.
Management teams just for whatever reason they don't measure progress by our discovery work that we do. They measure progress by how much code we've written or how much of a product
Exactly.
design we've
How
completed.
much are we creating, right? How more agile can we
Yeah.
get more stuff done at the same time? Yeah, not couple of key lessons. Oops, stop sharing. Close that poll out. All right. So after all this, Heather and Tommy, they're reflecting, right? They started with a challenge, a reactive, fragmented product process that couldn't keep pace with customer needs or business strategy, right? For delivering either customer or business value, right? Didn't happen by accident. The changes they did, it required a mind shift, right? Mindset shift away from firefighting and feature chasing and towards strategy, discovery, and cross-functional alignment, right? The blueprint, it didn't help wellness just build better product. It helped them become a better product organization. Instead of just reacting to every internal request or market pressure, they built a system where the product's aligned for strategic and customer driven, right? So here's what I think want you to take away a couple of things, right? Product teams must work cross-functionally, right? It's not a solo function, it's a teamwork, right? Align with marketing, align with sales, align with engineering. Make sure they know the insights that you're pulling from customers and work together to create those solutions, right? We're going to create outcome-driven decision making. We're not just going to be feature chasing, right? Every initiative must tie back to the impact it's going to have that we want to have with customers, right? The validation of customers, well, it happens early and it happens often, right? We're not building to a blind one instance of someone asking for something just because they're a big customer, right? And we do need to think about and managing the product life cycles, right? From launch to end of life, right? Tommy reflected on, he said, this process has changed the way we think about product management. It's not about launching things, it's about delivering real outcomes for customers, and as a result, outcomes for our business, right? So whether you are refining how your team works or leading a full transformation, let this be your next step. Build with purpose, lead with clarity. So what's the first step? Well, as the author of the Productside Blueprint ebook, I'd say download the ebook, right? How many people want a copy of the ebook? That's our next poll.
Yeah, that's our next poll. There we go. Let's see here.
See if people answer. Sounds like people want that have stayed around this long probably want a copy of the ebook.
Yeah, I think so.
Can
All right. 5 more
you share?
seconds on this one. 5, 4,
Looks like everybody says yes.
3, 2, 1. Yep. Okay. Yep. Oh, I guess you
All
already
right,
just.
so let's tell them how to get it.
Yep. All right. Yeah. So take me to that next slide. Oops. There we go.
All right, here's how you get it.
So yeah,
Um,
here's the slide to get it. So there's a
so you
QR
can
code,
click on this QR code.
and I believe Robin, you're going to post a link also if people prefer to use a link. There we go.
Yeah, link in the
So we
chat.
got a
Perfect.
link to be able to go and access it and download it. So that's the first offer that we want to have put in there. So definitely take a moment, download that ebook. Let's go to the next slide and talk about some of the upcoming opportunities. One is we have another AI course right, AI product management class coming up here at the end of June. And we do have a special discount associated with that. And so you're going to get 22 or 20, yeah, 20%. No,
$300 off. Yeah,
yeah, it's
300 off.
10% off. But you do have to make this decision by the end of this week to get that discount. So if you are in a situation where you've been asked to better explore how to do AI within your product, or you just want to learn how to use AI in your work, this is a great class to be able to do this. This is online. 4 hours each day, and it goes across these 4 days from June 23rd to the 26th. So take advantage of that. All right. What's next up is our next webinar. So we
Nice.
have another webinar coming up on July the 2nd. So here in the US, that's just a couple of days before the 4th of July holiday. But hopefully you're still going to be around and can join us for that. So Ryan and Dean are going to lead us through how do we think about rebooting our career in this age of AI? So AI is definitely impacting our careers in some way. I think some think it's impacting our careers negatively, but I think you're going to get a view here that it's really something that we can take advantage of and better leverage for the work that we do. And then finally, here is some additional courses that are coming up. So there's the AI class coming up in June. There's another one in July. We still have some online of our core foundational course, Optimal Product Management. We have several of those coming up over the next 2 months. And we have some in-person classes coming up. So I'm going to be teaching here in Austin starting next week. So we still have a few slots open there, but excellent in-person class if you want to join us here. And then in September, we are going to be taking this to the UK. So if anyone is over in the Europe area or Middle East and want to join us there, that would be great. And one in New York City coming up in October. So we're really excited about the in-person, all of our classes, but definitely the in-person classes that are coming up. So I think with that, Kenny, we got just a few minutes for Q&A. If you
Yes,
haven't
sir.
some questions yet that you have that come to your mind and you haven't asked yet, go ahead and put that into the Q&A window and we'll make sure to ask it. But I got one here, and this is from James. He asked, is there anything unique about the process at Wellness that would not apply to other businesses that might leverage the blueprint?
I don't really think so. The key thing was the status that Wellness was in before they started, where they basically didn't. They were taking a lot of feature requests from their biggest customers and not really
Mhm.
understanding their customers, not understanding the strategy, not understanding what outcomes they were chasing.
Okay.
So
All right. Let's see here. We got another one here. And this is from Susan. It says, the work you created here focused on product, or is the work you created here focused on products at a specific stage of their life cycle?
what do you think, Tom? Is it? I don't think so.
No, no, it's not. Now, if you think about well, actually, I guess even in the wellness case, it wasn't about creating a new product. It was already a product in the market.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, whether we're creating a new product or we're enhancing an existing product, if our product is in the growth phase, if it's in the maturity phase, even if it's in the decline phase, all of these principles are things that are
Yeah.
applicable in terms
In
of
the
any.
ebook, we even talk about one of the products at Wellness that is actually nearing the end of its life. It's no longer being functional. And they actually, there's an example they walk through using the blueprint to figure out what they do in the process of actually retiring that
Mhm.
platform that this new that this new buildness product's going to replace essentially.
Yeah, exactly. You have to do discovery. You have to be able
Yeah.
to do the define or the create because there's a lot of work often required to remove a product from the market that uses cross-functional resources, and you have to be able to communicate. So while it's not a launch, you still have to be able to do very strong stakeholder communication or customer communication.
Yeah. So it almost doesn't matter. It's for an intro product, one that needs to be updated or one that needs to be that's in a growth phase or one that even is in the decline and retirement phase.
Okay. All right.
Oops.
One more. I think we got one more question here that came
Oh,
in,
good.
and that should take us right here to the app. Is how about companies going through agile transformation? Does Where does this all fit into that?
Yeah, so I think the agile transformation is really about how do we develop things faster, right? Which is the core piece of that create phase. So the rest of this can feed right into that agile transformation, not to just make sure you're developing features quickly, rapidly, and iterating, but that they're the right features, that you're getting the right feedback
Mhm.
on the features, that you're testing, evolving, and iterating. So it's a nice marriage and alignment if you're doing agile transformation to also throw the product blueprint at it at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you and I, we talked about this earlier this week, is where we've seen multiple of our customers who have gone through agile transformation and they're still stuck in very much a feature delivery mode and tracking how many user story or story points did we deliver during this sprint? Are we improving how much of that we deliver? And while yes, that's an interesting number, that's not the ultimate goal. It's the value. Or what kind of value are we delivering?
Creating more of what customers don't need faster doesn't actually impact the business at all.
That very well stated. Well, I don't see any more questions coming up, and we have reached the top of the hour. So, first of all, thank you to everybody who joined us today and participated. Thank you for sharing your questions, and definitely, if you haven't already downloaded the ebook, we encourage that to do it. If you're watching online or watching the recording, we want to encourage you to download this ebook and start thinking about how you can apply those concepts to improve your practices at your organization and move you from that chaos into greater clarity. So, with that, Kenny, thank you so much for leading us through this. And thank you to everyone who attended. And we hope to see you again.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy and have a wonderful rest of the day.
All righty. Bye.
Take care. Bye.